how do you usually approach like situations where you don't want to like put too much thought into something that brings stress? So I feel like it's kind of not that you don't want to see it so it doesn't hurt you in a way, but it's like more like you don't want to focus your attention into that so it doesn't grow. So how do you approach those situations like to do the work but without going to the extreme?
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. That is a general principle of the mind, what you put your attention on grows. And so it's a concern sometimes when people are new to the work of, am I putting my attention on the negativity? Am I putting my attention on something that is stressful or negative or a problem? And is that going to end up causing me more pain or even re-traumatizing myself? You can re-injure yourself from doing that. And so there's a little caution there. Okay, well, uh, I want to work through my stress. I want to be free of that. But is going in and looking at it going to cause more stress and going to create a bigger problem as a result of that? That's a legitimate concern, actually. So how do you approach a situation like that where you don't really want to make it worse, and you don't want to uh, re-enliven it in a way that's going to cause additional trauma? Then how do you approach it? How do you approach it? Um, so I guess the first thing that comes up is just understanding the work itself as a tool, as a way of approaching things. There's a big difference between opening up something that was traumatic in the past and looking at it and re-experiencing it. There's a big difference between that when you're doing that without the work and when you're doing it with the work. The work, when you're using the work itself, it itself is a way to approach situations like that. Because what are we doing in the work? We're not trying to figure out what happened. We're not trying to analyze it or understand it so much. We're just trying to let any stuck part inside get heard and then be understood, be listened to, but then also questioned. And so when you know that you're approaching an old situation with the idea of questioning it, it's a little different than when you're just approaching it to understand it or to try to see what it is or just to look at it. Because when you're just going to look at it, you're going to see all the devastation and how terrible it was, and you're going to remember all those feelings. And there's no direction past that. That's the end point. Okay, I'm looking at it, and isn't that terrible? And oh my God, I feel terrible now. And this is, why did I go here? And now I'm having flashbacks, and yeah, it can be terrible. So that's when you're just approaching it to look at it by itself. And if the mind is open enough, even looking at it doesn't have to be traumatic. I'm exaggerating here just to make a point. But if the mind is open enough, it may also start to see that with more perspective. But when you're coming with the work, which is a program designed to help you digest stressful situations, it's like a special set of questions that you're bringing that's allowing you to go beyond the first experience of stress and experience something bigger and see if there's other ways of seeing the situation and seeing if you can find compassion and understanding for others and for yourself in the same situation. It's like the work is a way of trying to open and expand the mind even on a particular stressful situation. So if you're coming towards an old situation with these 4 questions and the turnarounds and this idea of let's see if we can find another way of looking at it, just that can make that same memory, that same stressful situation be non-traumatic when you approach it. So I guess my short answer is that using the work itself is a great way of approaching any kind of negativity, because it's not just doesn't just stay negative. We have questions like, is it true, to kind of make you say, oh, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was, or who would you be without the thought? And maybe there's some space that opens up, or turn the thought around and experience the opposite of what you were thinking and play with that. So my experience going into different traumatic situations, both with myself and with clients, is that it gets lighter. It feels lighter. People sometimes ask me, don't you get bogged down by listening to stressful stories all day and hearing other people's stress and everything? But that's not my experience. I feel light at the end of the day. I feel like I've been inspired many times when I'm listening to people's stressful work, because stress is just the starting point of the work. It just starts there, and then as you work through it, it actually opens something bigger, and there's like relief that comes, there's laughter that comes, there's sweetness that comes in, and that's the result for me of doing the work. It's just starting with something stressful. So that said, that's probably the biggest point that I want to make, is that the work itself does not dwell on negativity. It just starts with negativity and it transforms negativity. And when you transform negativity, what do you get? You get something very positive. So that's probably the most important thing. But there are some other things you can do as you're approaching stressful situations that are very strong for you, or that are very, that were traumatic for you. And that is, number one, be gentle and take your time. Maybe just make sure you're open for that. Don't push yourself to do it, because if you're pushing yourself, then that's when the work doesn't work as well, and that's where you can end up just getting back into this stressful cycle of believing what you were believing, and then you can go down into the vicious cycle again. So don't push, be gentle, check with yourself. Am I really open to doing this work? If yes, great. If not, okay, there's plenty of other stressful things I can do the work on and kind of build my muscles for doing the work. And when those are stronger, then I can go and work on something that's a little bit heavier weight, and I can handle that. The other thing that can help is if you have something that's kind of more heavyweight, if you work with somebody who has a lot of experience in doing the work, for example, a facilitator, someone who's done a lot of the work themselves, then they can also make sure that you're doing the work in a way that is gentle and also keeping in the work. Because what the mind can do when it starts to get into a stressful situation is it gets distracted by the stress of it and starts going into believing the stress and getting caught up in the story. And so a facilitator can see you starting to do that and just say, oh, no, we're just doing the work here. Come back to the question, which is not stressful, is, who would you be without that thought? Or, just notice how you're reacting. Don't go into believing. And so there's a fine line of when you're in and out of the work, and a facilitator can hold you with that. When you stay in the work, when you stay with the 4 questions, it's safe. It's 100% safe, because you're there working with what you're believing, challenging what you're believing, and starting to expand on what you thought was there, and you're starting to see something bigger, something different. And that is that's an inspiring process. It's an opening kind of process. And so if it seems like it's too much for you and you can't quite hold yourself in the work, and that's the problem, you get taken out of your work because of your own stressful stories, then having a facilitator hold you can be a great way to approach situations that are something that seems overwhelming to you. And the other thing with facilitator will do is when you notice or when they notice that you're taking a turnaround too far and maybe you're starting to beat yourself up with it, or you're getting, you know, just getting too, like you're limiting yourself, or you're exaggerating, or you're doing things in a more of a extreme way within the work, they can just bring you back to the central spirit of the work, which is a gentle, easy way of looking for balance in the situation. So I would say those are probably the most valuable things I could offer in terms of how to approach a situation like that. Be gentle with yourself, don't push yourself, and work with a facilitator if you need it. Even just, even anyone. Sometimes just working with a partner can be very helpful in that regard. But having that extra experience can help. But just remember that it's the work itself, the 4 questions and the turnarounds, they will meet you anywhere. You can go into any deep, dark hole, and these 4 questions will help you shine the light in that hole. And when you have light, it's not scary. You just see things as they are, and it becomes totally digestible, totally understandable, and what seemed like an overwhelming kind of situation may turn out to be totally okay. I've worked with people who've had PTSD, like really serious types of traumas and situations, and it's amazing to see sometimes after an hour, sometimes after 2 hours of doing the work, how that perspective of that situation, the feeling of that situation changed. Even though the details of the situation are the same, but the feeling is different. And the way the person is seeing it is different. And then the feeling inside is a lighter heart. So it's valuable to work these deeply stressful situations and traumas from the past, but just make sure you hold to the work. That's the lifeline. That's what will keep you from getting carried away into negative stories. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. The work is powerful. It's so simple. On it can work on anything. It's up to you, but it can work on anything. It can work on the tiniest little stress, it can work on the biggest, hugest stress, and it can bring you back home. That's what its job is, to just point you and say, hey, where's the home again? Where's the peace again? Oh, right, over this way. It's not over here, it's over here. And if you follow the directions, it will point you back home every time. It will point you back to peace every time. It doesn't matter how scary the monster is that you're seeing, just follow the directions. Okay, what am I thinking? Oh, it's a monster. And then, oh, how do you react? Oh, it's terrible. I'm scared. And who would you be without the thought? Okay, I'm not sure what this is, but I'm open. And then turn it around. It's not a monster. And you see, like, oh my gosh, okay, I can see some reasons why it's not a monster. And in the end, you start finding the truth of the balanced point of view. And that's all. Balance brings peace. And the work always points you back there. If you just follow that pointer, then it will lead you out of any deep, dark hole and bring you back to a place of home, a place of comfort, place of light, place of peace. Yeah, that's how it works. Very simple. You know, I sometimes, the analogy I use is the work is like a compass, and it tells you, you start out by looking at, it points you, where's the stress? So it points you, okay, in this direction, that's the stress. I can feel it. Where's all this most stress? It's right there. And you go into that stress, and then you do this work, and then the work points you in the opposite direction, turn around, and says, okay, if the stress is there, then try going in this direction. And so you turn around, go in that direction, and it miraculously brings you out of stress. So you can trust it. It's very simple, and and yet, of course, there's subtlety to it, and it does help to have experience, as I mentioned, to support you. But the basic principle is always the same. And in all the years of doing the work, I've consistently found that it just points me right. It does me, goes me, helps me go in the right direction in terms of in the direction of more peace. And that's all. That's all. So yeah, it's a great question because the work can be used to deal with any kind of thing. When you're new to the work, it can be overwhelming to try that. It may be too much for you in the beginning. And so be gentle and take it one step at a time. Work with small situations. They're huge as well. And, when you're ready, those big ones will be there for you, and you can use the same approach for them as you would for any situation.